The Adventures of a Newcomer, Chapter 19, Ethelred Preston, Brighton Albany Villa. It was the noon recess of Thursday morning. The small boys, with the exception of a few stragglers, were all gathered together discussing the disappearance of Ethelred Preston and examining the various articles just restored to them, which the darling had attempted to run away with. "Hullo," said Peter Lane suddenly. "Here comes Earl Merriweather, and there's something odd about his face. He looks puzzled." "He's going to tell us some news," said Johnny Martin. "What is it, Earl?" cried Peter. "Boys, I have the most extraordinary news." Every head was fixed in attention. "Ethelred Preston is back again." The boys stood as though they had been cast in a trance. "He's in the parlor with Father Edmunds," Earl went on. The listeners began to look at each other with puzzled faces. "Is he to be arrested, Earl?" inquired Devereux. "It seems not. I haven't seen Ethelred yet, but I just now met Father Howard, and he was laughing. I don't see yet why he was laughing. He contrived to tell me between his laughs that 15 minutes ago the man at the door brought the president of the college a card that read, 'Master Ethelred Preston, Albany Villa, Brighton, at home Tuesdays.'" "And what did Father Edmunds do with when he got that card?" inquired Haynes. "When Father Edmund got the card, he ordered his secretary to telephone for a policeman." There was a sigh of relief from the auditors. "Then Father Edmunds waited till the policeman came and asked him to stay in the hall outside the parlor for a moment. The president entered the parlor and came out in a minute and told the policeman that there would be no need of his services." "Oh-ho!" This was but one of many expressions of astonishment which this announcement provoked. "But I haven't told you the strangest part yet. Father Howard says that not only has Father Edmunds decided not to arrest Ethelred, but that he actually entered his name as a student of the college." "Oh, there's a joke somewhere," cried Haynes. "That's what I said to Father Howard when he told me that Ethelred was admitted, but he laughed more than ever, and told me that he wanted you all to keep together till he had presented you to Ethelred." "We're not ready to meet him yet, Earl," said Ed Devereux. "There's not a rotten egg in the crowd." "It's odd," commented Earl, "but we little fellers know that the president sees further than we, and—" "Here comes Father Howard," broke in Devereux. All turned quickly towards the entrance to the residence building. There at the top of the steps stood Father Howard, and holding the father's hand in his own, a very small boy with a very pale face. "Boys," said Father Howard, and as he spoke the crowd surged about the steps, "I want to introduce to you your new schoolmate, Ethelred Preston." When the newcomers took off his sailor cap and exposing a sunny head of ringlets, bowed gravely, he was facing such a staring, stupid, wondering, open-mouthed crowd of petrified figures as one seldom comes on in this world of constant surprises. He was a singularly pretty boy with very dark blue eyes and fair, regular features. In dress he was a model of neatness. His every movement spoke refinement. Earl was the first to recover himself, running up the steps. He took the newcomer's hands. "Are you really Ethelred Preston?" "That is my name, sir," answered the lad with a smile and a bow. "Three cheers for Mamma's darling!" cried Peter Lane. The small boy with the big voice, hats and caps were flying on high, while cheers upon cheer rent the air till little Ethelred was blushing like a rose. Father Howard, meanwhile, was whispering in Earl's ear. Earl's face lightened up. He nodded assent and made a motion for silence. "Ethelred Preston, you've got a nickname. It's Mamma's darling. How do you like that nickname?" "I don't like it at all, if you please." "I don't like nicknames." "Very good. Now I'll tell you what we boys will do. If you explain to us how you happen to be Ethelred Preston, and how it comes that the other Ethelred Preston is not you, we boys will agree to drop your nickname. Isn't that so, boys?" There was a hearty and unanimous assent. "Thank you, sir," said Ethelred. "I shall tell you my story with pleasure, if Father Howard has no objections." "It will be a pleasure for me to hear it from your lips, Ethelred." "Thank you, father." And Ethelred began his story, and held his audience breathless for 10 minutes. There was a certain circumstance, however, which he did not explain, but which came to light afterwards. These points, pieced into his narrative, will be set down in the following chapter. Chapter 20. Why Ethelred failed to reach Henryton in due time. It was a chilly morning late in January when a closed carriage drove up to the station at Brighton. The coachman threw open the door, and there stepped out a lady and a little boy. The lady, evidently a woman of refinement, was in tasteful but modest attire. The boy's costume, on the other hand, was picturesque and much out of the ordinary. Any little girl would have detected in the ripple and splendor of his golden ambrosial curls the constraining influence of the crimping irons. There were shining buckles upon his low shoes, and largeness of the buckles forcing into notice the smallness of his feet. The sober black silk ribbons, tied in a bow knot, bound his shapely knickerbockers at the knees. He wanted but a sash to complete his resemblance to that darling of all mothers and most girls, the little Lord Fauntleroy. The woman was somewhat flushed about the eyes and had evidently been weeping. The boy, with compressed lips and frowning brow, held his face towards the ground. He was clearly upset. From time to time she gazed at him with that pathetic look in which a mother's love, unrequited, so often expressed itself. But the boy gave her no heed. Involuntarily a sigh broke from her. The little fellow's face, despite himself, softened. He looked up and saw the love shining in that other face. "Mamma," he cried, "please take me along with you." "No, Ethelred, dear," the mother made answer, as they walked into the deserted ladies' waiting-room. "Your delicate constitution could not endure the hardships of a trip across the ocean at this rude season of the year, and indeed I'm sorry that you may not come. You know, my darling, that I shall miss you far more than you will miss me. Try, dear, to be brave and cheerful." The mother's voice faltered on these words. She gathered herself together and added, "Make the parting easy for your mother, my only child." The kind, tender mother turned away her head and hid her face in her handkerchief. Let all of us who see by faith, as it were, and from afar, the sacred and heroic love which mothers have for their little ones, let us, too, turn away our eyes and bow our heads before this loveliness of grief. A moment passed in silence, and then Ethelred turned to the attack. "But I don't want to go to a boarding school, Ma. The boys are so rough, and besides, at Henryton College they're all Catholics." "Yes, but there are many good Catholics, Ethelred, dear. I have known several myself, and Henryton College is so very well conducted. I met one of their boys last summer, when I visited the sisters of Mrs. Merriweather. Her boy Earl, he was much a finished little gentleman, and I felt anxious for you two to meet. And now I am forced to send you two to the college where he is attending, and I feel sure, dear, that if you only put on a brave face, you will like the school very much." "But, Mamma," cried Ethelred, putting his arms about his mother, "I can't bear to leave you." Forgetting the time and place, Mrs. Preston threw her arms about the child's neck, and mother and son indulged in a good cry. Ethelred was the first to recover himself, and when he had wiped his eyes, the pout was done. "Well, Mamma, I'll go to please you." "You darling," cried the delighted mother, and she fell to gazing upon the pretty, somewhat effeminate features of her boy, as though for the last time. There was a slight lump in Ethelred's throat, and to relieve it, he gave a little hymn. "Have you your cough drops, dear?" "Yes, Mamma." "Take one at once. The early morning air is sharp, and your cold is not quite done. I put a bottle of cough medicine in your trunk. Be sure and take it regular, my darling. Oh dear, how time flies! Only 5 minutes more, and we shall be parted. Promise me, dear, not to put your head out of the car window. I won't, Ma. And don't stand on the platform, Ethelred, and be sure to keep your seat. You will reach Henryton at 9 o'clock this morning. Go direct to the college, dear, and don't spend your money on cakes and candies on the way, or you will make yourself sick. Mrs. Preston went on with a series of don'ts which lasted till the train, which was to bear Ethelred away, pulled up at the depot. I'm so sorry to say that Ethelred, who was something of a spoiled boy, took these probations in bad part. He lapsed again into his pout and behaved at a moment when signs of extreme affection are most expected, as the spoiled children often do in such circumstances. The fond mother, fearing that Ethelred might neglect some of her many injunctions, secured the ear of the conductor. "Please keep your eye on my little boy, sir," Ethelred bridled. "See that he stays in the sleeper," continued Mrs. Preston. "Don't let him run around, please, and keep him out of danger, and—" "Yes, ma'am, all aboard?" The conductor waved his hand. Mrs. Preston snatched a last kiss, and presently stood weeping alone while the train moved away. Ethelred, as he entered the sleeping car, was in a bad mood. To have a conductor watching over him, as though he were a baby. If he had been an infant, his mother could hardly have varied her request. Ethelred was something of a baby in a small boy's sense of the word, and being a baby, he resented his mother's course far more than a manlier boy would have resented it. To make matters worse, the conductor carried out Mrs. Preston's injunctions with a literalness that was most galling to the spoiled child. He repeated Mrs. Preston's word to the porter and added a few directions of his own within range of the small boy's burning ears. Ethelred was at one and the same time furious and frightened. 15 minutes had passed over these unpleasant emotions. When the train stopped at the station of a very pretty little village, Ethelred rose and had gone as far as the platform when he was stopped upon the steps by the porter. "No, you don't, Johnny," he said. "Get right back into that car. You just keep quiet, and in an hour you'll be at Henryton." "You think I'm a baby?" protested Ethelred. "You were once, and you haven't got over it altogether." A few loafers and passengers laughed at this, and, covered with shame, Ethelred retired into the sleeper. He had hardly taken his seat when an overgrown boy with a big tray entered the car, looked about eagerly, and finally fixed his small eyes upon Ethelred. After a short survey, he approached. "I say, young feller," he said, seating himself beside the little lad, "I'd like to show you something that you want." As he spoke, he uncovered his tray and exposed to view a collection of cuffs, collars, and odds and ends. "See there! Look at those splendors! I've got 'em all sizes and for every age. Here's a pair that will fit you. Just look at them, glistening." And with considerable enthusiasm shining from his eyes, the strange boy dangled a tiny pair of suspenders in Ethelred's face. "If you please," said Ethelred, "I don't want any suspenders. But just feel 'em. See the way they stretch? They're just running over with elastic, and they'll last you till you're so big you won't want to wear any other." "I tell you, I don't want them." "You only think you don't want 'em. Why, I'll let you have these pair for 60 cents. They cost me 75 cents wholesale, and I'll swear to it." "I tell you, I don't want them. I don't wear suspenders. I wear a belt." The peddler gazed at Ethelred with much pity upon his mottled face. "What? A fellow your size not wearing suspenders? You ought to, unless you want to be a baby. Every boy that goes to school wears suspenders. Don't you go to school?" "I'm on my way to school now, but I don't want to go to school." "Then take a pair of suspenders with you. Here, I'll just give 'em to you. Take 'em for 45 cents. If I want suspenders, I'll get them at that old school. What school you going to? Henryton College. I've been going to school all my life, continued Ethelred with a pout. At least, I've been kept at my books day after day, and I'm about tired of it. Besides, I don't care about going to an old boarding school. I wish I had your chance, said the peddler. Here I am 17 years old and scarcely no schoolin'. I've been peddling suspenders and things all my life, and I'm tired of it. I'd much rather peddle suspenders than go to school, Ethelred said as he spoke, and pouted so successfully that he presented what is popularly known as a baby face to his new acquaintance. But that young man's sense of humor was not disturbed in the least. And I'd a heap rather go to school than peddle suspenders. A boarding school is a penitentiary, added Ethelred with another baby face of disgust. You get clothed and lodged and educated, though. They learn you all kinds of things. But I don't want to learn. My head is tired of names and flowers and stars and all sorts of stuff. What I want is a holiday. Take these here for 35 cents. No, I don't want suspenders. The peddler pretended to put them away. He paused in the act and said, Here, 25 cents. Ethelred took the suspenders. The peddler then put aside his box, and having carefully examined the silver quarter of $1, turned to Ethelred. My name is Packy Jarbo. Is that so? Yes, people call me Packy. Though my right name is Oliver. What's yourn? Ethelred Preston. Was you ever at boarding school before? No, I never was myself. And I don't want to go. I'd rather dig potatoes or hold a plow. You said a while ago that you'd rather sell suspenders. Is that so? Yes, indeed. I'd rather do anything. Packy fell into a study. I'll tell you what, Preston. You'd like to sell suspenders, and I'd like to see what a boarding school is like. Suppose we change places? Oh, no. So you didn't mean what you said then. You were tellin' lies. You were just a bawlin'. No, I wasn't. But we can't change places without being found out. Besides, even if I didn't care about going to boarding school, it doesn't follow that I feel like running away. Didn't you just say a minute ago that you was never at boarding school in your life? Yes. Then the people who teach at that school don't know you, do they? No, I never met any of them. What is more, I don't want to meet any of them either. And do you know any of the boys that go to that school? No, I heard of one boy, Earl Merriweather, but I never saw one of them before. Well then, why couldn't I go on your place? No one would know the difference. Little Ethelred had not the courage to say that such an exchange would be wrong. Like most mamma's darlings, he was weak, so he contented himself with answering. It would be all right, perhaps, for a day or two, but they would find out after a while that there was something wrong. You couldn't use my clothes, and when you'd open my trunk everybody would see that the things in it could not possibly belong to you. Packy Jarbo here made a discretion, inquiring into the price of Ethelred's shoes and various other articles. He offered incidentally to buy Ethelred much neater suit for $5. Ethelred did not happen to need a suit. Packy thereupon returned to the main question. You said you know that I could take your place for a day or so, only without getting found out. Yes, and I'm sure it is so. Well, suppose we exchange places for 2 days. Ethelred looked alarmed. You needn't try to back out, continued Packy eagerly. Here's the way we can do it. I'll go on right to Henryton College and present myself as you. Today is Thursday, and I stay there today, and tomorrow night I clear out, and you come in on Saturday morning. I'd rather not, said Ethelred uneasily. But look, you'll have a fine show to learn what a peddler's life is. and it will be lots of fun for you, and I'll have a chance to see how a boarding school is worked. I'll let you have my peddler's outfit, and I'll give you a map of my route. Just think of it. You'll be your own boss for 2 days." Ethelred could not refrain from showing some pleasure at this last inducement. "And then," continued the enterprising Packy, "it will be such a joke. You come to the college on Saturday morning, and then the boys learn how they've been fooled. They'll think you're awful smart. It will be a great joke." "That's so, but then I don't think I should like to—" "Oh, well, if you're afraid to stand by what you've said, all right. You're a little coward, and won't go anywhere without your mammas along. Then things on your knickerbockers at the knees are her apron strings, and you're tied to 'em." "I'm not a coward, and I'm not afraid," answered Ethelred with flashing eyes, "only I don't care about trying that plan. You're a coward, and you're afraid, and I just dare you change places with me for 2 days. Ah, you little coward, you dare not." "Just to show you that I'm not afraid," cried Ethelred, "I'll change places with you. There! You think I can't take care of myself because I'm small. You may go to Henryton in my place. And now tell me what I'm to do." "Shake hands on that," said Packy. "That's right. You've got more sand than I thought. Well, first of all, instead of getting off at Henryton, you get off at Collinsville, which isn't so far up the road. That's as far as my ticket goes. This morning and this afternoon you take in Collinsville and sell all the suspenders and notions you can there, and then this afternoon about 4 you start off for Haggerton, which is just 7 miles from Collinsville." "How do I get there?" "It's not on the railroad you walk." "Walk 7 miles?" cried Ethelred, opening his eyes and holding up his hands. "Yes, of course. You're not a baby. There's no way of riding there. The railroad doesn't run through it, and you don't want to hire a carriage. You must look out not to get lost. I'll tell you the way after a while, and if you forget it, you can ask most any person in Collinsville." "It isn't 7 miles," continued Packy, noticing Ethelred was still frightened. "It's only about 4. I said 7 to scare you. When you get to Hagertown, there's a sort of hotel, the first thing you come to as you walk along the road. It's kept by an uncle of mine, and he'll give you a bed and supper and breakfast, and the next morning cheap. Then you go round and sell what you can in the village, and stay that night at my uncle's again. Next morning you leave the suspenders that are left over and the other traps with my uncle, and all the money you've got in on the sales, and go back to Collinsville so as to catch the train that passes 8:50 for Henryton. See?" "Yes, but I don't know how to sell all these things." "I'll give you the prices on a list, and it's all written out. And now you must show me how to play my part. They'll suspect something when you get to the college because you know I'm a little fellow." "How do you know that?" "Because Ma shows me the letter she wrote to the president of the college, and she talks about her little Ethelred and tells him what care he must take of me. When the president sees you, he'll know there's something wrong." "Don't you see any way of my getting over that?" said Packy anxiously. "Why, yes," answered Ethelred, after a short pause and with some reluctance. "You know mothers don't notice how fast their children grow. You look as though you've been growing lately." "That's so. I think I can talk them over on that." "But why do you want to go to the school for 2 days? There's no sense in that." "Yes, there is. I want to get an idea of what it's like." Packy counted on finding his profit out of the 2 days at Henryton. At the very worst, he could borrow $5 or $6. In any event, he trusted his luck. He would contrive to be none of the poorer for his 2 days away from his regular calling. The two then fell to compared notes. Ethelred told Packy about his mother, his home, Earl Merriweather, and crammed the enterprising peddler for his new role. He gave him a few of his visiting cards and provided him with a letter of recommendation from the pastor and his narrative in his native town. In return, Packy Jarbo furnished Ethelred with a price list, explaining very carefully as he did so all details. He also wrote out a little map showing the road to be taken from Collinsville to Haggerton. "There now," said Packy, passing over his stock to Ethelred. "You know your part, and I know mine. Here we are at Collinsville. It's only 12 or 15 miles from Henryton. Well, so long." Packy helped Ethelred out, and once they were upon the platform of the station, showed himself very solicitous in adjusting about Ethelred's neck the strap which supported the pack. He hung over Ethelred for rather a long time, tugging here, pulling there. 2 hours later in the day, Ethelred missed $3 silver from his vest pocket, wondered how he could have lost them. At the present moment, however, he stood very much confused and perplexed, watching the receding train, and wondering how he had been so foolish and so wicked as to have allowed himself to be drawn into this cheap and dishonest trick. "I'm a goose," he said to himself. Poor Ethelred was right in his self-condemnation. Strictly speaking, he was not a goose, but he had allowed a fit of peevishness and a bit of human respect to drag him into a position which was neither wise nor honorable. The little lad, clad in a dainty suit and carrying a peddler's pack, excited no little interest and comment in the village of Collinsville. He had the polite way of a home-bred boy, and people were astonished at the congruity. Ladies who, as a rule, made short work of peddlers, were pleased to examine Ethelred's wares, and several of them made purchases. Ethelred began to enjoy the situation. And we'll continue the rest of this chapter on Friday. Thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.